you done now?
It's you and me, Honeybunch.
Priscilla.
Well, we know what's in the study. Just come from the library, and the stranger's locked up in the lounge.
Let's go look in the billiard room again.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Clue the Movie Podcast, where we break down the 1985 cult classic movie Clue, 1 minute at a time. My name is Brad Gilmore. I'm joined always by the General Jeff Smith. Jeff, how are you doing?
Hello, how are you? General Jeff Smith here.
Yeah, I like this little podcast.
I'm embracing it now. I'm embracing my military status.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I like your microphone. You look official. You look like you're actually putting thought in it.
I'm slowly. Look what you've made me turn into.
And also joining us back on the show, a highly requested guest and someone who we really enjoyed having on last time, John Hatch. He is the author of What Do You Mean Murder? Clue in the Making of a Cult Classic, which hits stands on 11/7. That's November the 7th, 2023. And you can also see him at the Mysterious Bookshop in New York City on November the 9th of 2023. He is John Hatch. John, how you doing?
Fantastic. Happy to be back.
We're excited. You know, it was an exciting minute for an exciting guest. And I'm sure we're going to break down everything that we saw in minute 47. I do, though, Jeff, it's been a minute since you and I actually sat and recorded, a couple weeks at this point. Yes. I know that we always have a lot of love from our Cluvians that we miss over that time. I do want to take a second to acknowledge a few of them. One of them, this is just left on our podcast feed. And again, if you want to leave us 5 stars and a rating, it helps the show. People discover it that way, or at least so I'm told. This came from M and J Foltz. The title of the review, Love the Podcast. 5 stars.
Hey.
And this is what it says. I found this podcast after I Facebook promoted the documentary, and I am enjoying the minute-by-minute reviews. This has been my favorite movie since I was 5 and gets better every time I watch it. Thank you for having a place for us to dive into the details, and they leave it with a heart emoji. Look at that.
Oh.
Very nice.
Who was that?
That was M and J Foltz.
Foltz.
All right. Here's another one. This is from P_Starling23. Favorite movie of all time, finally get ... It didn't finish in the thing, so I don't know what it says.
Cut off.
As a child in Rhode Island, my family and I would play Clue the board game every Saturday. Even at the age of 4, I understood and I played the game well. Well, you are obviously smart. When the movie came out, I was a mere 5 years old. When it finally came to TV, my parents videotaped it. I still have the well-worn VHS tape, and I would watch it more times than I care to count. The dialogue is well mesmerized. The songs and score emblazoned in my memory. Emblazoned, excuse me. I've never seen that word written out. And Boom Hass will always be my favorite song of all time. Okay? And my love and respect for, in my opinion, one of the most outstanding actresses to ever grace the screen, Leslie Ann Warren, began. Hey. Madeline Kahn is a very close second, along with Eileen Brennan. We've had Leslie Ann Warren on the podcast. This podcast has continued and expanded my love for this film, along with the elusive CD soundtrack, the children's book still in mint condition, and the various other collectibles. I cherish this podcast as my weekly Clue fix. From all the Cluvians, we thank you both for this excellent audio experience. Look at that.
Who was that?
That was from, give me one more moment here, P_Starling23. I'm going to put
P who played Clue at 4. Saw the movie at 5, probably drove themselves to the theater. They're so bright. That's awesome. And now they can add the book to their collection. What do you mean, Murder?
Hopefully they will.
Yeah.
That will be added to the collection. Now, Jeff, before we dive into the minute with John, do we have any updates from our Cluvians? And then I have one more game for us to play.
Yeah, we've got a pretty nice email. Well, yes, I don't know. I haven't read it in a while. Maybe it's not so good. Matt Blanton wrote us. He burned some calories to write to us. Hello, Brad and Jeff. Brad first. I first wanted to thank you for the Clue the Movie podcast. It's become the highlight of my week. Matt. I listen to it every Tuesday morning on my way to work. One of the things I most appreciate about this podcast is the fact that Jeff is so much funnier than it's not true. Is the fact that you both genuinely enjoy Clue the Movie. It's true. I have listened to other podcasts and followed bloggers, many of whom actually express a lot of disdain towards their subject. And I always end up quitting on them because they destroy my happy thoughts on the subject at hand. Not with this one. You have reinvigorated. We're having trouble today. Reinvigorated my love for this movie. That's nice. On the same lines, I often find myself laughing at the details you get wrong sometimes. Took a turn, Matt. Or the questions you ask. Laughing at the questions we ask. Should I go on? Sure. I wish I could talk to you both in real time and scream my corrections to you. But all in good fun, of course. I had to stop his screaming. I have often heard you mention that the flames on the side of my head. Oh, that's not the line. Matt. Glass houses. I've often heard you mention that the flames on the side of my head will be the most listened to podcast, and perhaps, maybe you said that. Maybe he's quoting you, Brad.
I think I said that.
I think he's quoting you when you screwed up. Okay, good. Wasn't me. You mentioned that flames on the side of my head will be the most listened to podcast, and perhaps you are correct, perhaps. But for me, the moments that actually created that moment are the most anticipated ones. So my whole life, I've never understood exactly what transpired the moment that Yvette was strangled. No matter what the ending really is, the murder just doesn't make any sense. That voice in the dark wasn't any of the players. I'd like to know who actually recorded that line. If we are to believe the real ending, how was Mrs. White downstairs rendezvousing with Yvette and then literally screaming in the dark bedroom upstairs within a few seconds before? And also, along those lines of the real ending, Mrs. Scarlett, she got married. Miss Scarlett was murdering the cop in the very next room, and Wadsworth would have been running down the stairs to answer the door and shoot the singing telegram girl. How did the three of them not see one another? And how was Wadsworth also seen a second later in the upstairs bedroom getting soaked by the shower? And how did Mrs. Scarlett unlock the library door to kill the cop? So many questions. I hope that this letter will bring to an end a certain long-standing curiosity that has plagued my mind for a lifetime. It is signed, a friend, a.k.a. Matt Blanton.
Okay.
A lot there, Matt.
A lot there. I agree with you. I sometimes scream at myself in correction when I listen back to this show.
That's true.
I've done that. So I definitely sympathize. John, do you want to throw out any answers to those queries that he levied at the end there? How did they not all see each other?
So first, I think the voice, I have to go look and make sure, but I think the voice in the billiard room is Jonathan Lynn trying to cover up, and just make it somebody else to keep it nice and secret. So I think that's who the voice is. It's the director. And how do they not see each other? So they had filmed. I don't know that I have like an in-canon answer for that. I don't know that I have maybe somebody was hiding. But I can tell you they filmed a lot more scenes with Wadsworth upstairs, and they cut them because they realized, he couldn't be downstairs murdering this person in two of the endings. And so they ended up cutting it. Like he fell down over a table and struggled to get back up and stuff like that. So they did pay attention to that part of it, but it's still kind of that ending where more than one person did it. It's kind of tricky to figure out how it would all work. How Madeline Kahn is walking down the stairs and then screaming a minute later upstairs.
Would you agree with this, though, John, that I think if you try to figure the movie out, you're playing a losing game a little bit as far as the murders themselves, because of the reason they have these three different endings, or because they have these three different endings, it's made to be somewhat ambiguous as far as what's actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. And that was the whole point of the different endings since the beginning. Even when like John Landis had, sketched out his plot and everything, even before Jonathan Lynn was hired, the whole point of different endings was to spoof, the murder mystery genre, and to show that, look, it doesn't even really matter. We can just swap out whoever we want for this. It's not quite that simple. It was hard for Jonathan Lynn to write and figure that out, and a lot of other writers couldn't figure it out. But that was the idea, that we're going to be able to kind of show that more than one of these works.
Yeah, I know that you can find it on YouTube. Siskel and Ebert, when they reviewed Clue in '85, that was one of the things that they complained about, is how can you get into this murder mystery when there's a chance that it's wrong twice.
Yeah.
Get over it, Siskel and Ebert.
I mean, come on. They missed the boat on a few movies, especially that Ebert. That Ebert wasn't a big comedy fan. Actually, if you go back and look at Ebert, he got a lot of the comedies wrong. Siskel was not as. You
think Siskel was the one that had a better sense of humor?
I think he had slightly a better sense of humor. I think he had.
Have you seen them when they're on Late Night with David Letterman back in the day? They're actually pretty funny when they used to be, because David Letterman would just make fun of them.
Well, you need to seek out the Tonight Show clip where Chevy Chase is on the show with Carson and Siskel and Ebert, and Chevy Chase is mocking them behind their backs the entire time. Really great moment. Because this minute that we just had, not a lot of action there. I know, John, you do have some interesting insight that I want to talk to you about here in just a moment, but we also got another message from our Cluvian, and this is what happens when you take a couple weeks off. You build up on some messages. This is from Sophia, and her last name is Stasuli, I believe. Sophia Stasuli. And after her name is MSRD. I'm not sure what those letters mean. I was going to ask you, Masters of Science? Research and Development is what I'm going to go with. I think that's wrong, but I'm going to go with it anyway. She sent this, I guess, fan casting of a 2023 version of Clue and who everybody would be played by. I'm sure y'all have seen these out and about, but I want to go with you all and see what you think of these names for our game piece characters and everybody really in the movie. Are you all ready to hear this? And I'll just come to your reactions as we go. So for Mrs. White, we have Aubrey Plaza. For Mr. Green, Ed Helms. Like that one. Colonel Mustard is Nick Offerman. Yvette the Maid, Margot Robbie. The singing telegram girl is Kate Masucci. I'm not saying her last name right. The stranger is Steve Zahn. Mr. Body, played by Robert Downey Jr. And then here's where I think they really get into their bag with these fan castings. Wadsworth is played by Benedict Cumberbatch. Professor Plum by Bill Hader. Mrs. Peacock by the great Meryl Streep. And Miss Scarlet, Anna de Armas. What do we think of this cast? What do we think of this cast? I think some of the comedy chops might not all the way be there, but some of them
I like Ed Helms. Ed Helms as Green is pretty good. I could see him doing the turn at the end of Indian 3. Meryl Streep, who I've been enjoying on Only Murders in the Building this season. Yeah. So she could be she's very funny this season. Mm-hmm. John's nodding. You're watching it too, sir?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. She's been great.
Yes. I don't care about you, Brad. John's the guest. Yeah, no, she's hilarious. And even in Death Becomes Her. Fantastic.
Robert Zemeckis film. There's actually a Back to the Future reference in that movie. Miss Scarlet by Anna de Armas. I could see, she was in Knives Out. Very beautiful woman, kind of seductive. I could see perhaps Miss Scarlet. What do you think, John Hatch, of these names?
Yeah. I mean, some of them I can see. I really like Benedict Cumberbatch, but I don't know if he'd be the best Wadsworth. I don't know about his. He can be funny, but I don't know. I mean, yeah, that one is interesting. Miss Scarlet, Anna de Armas, I could see. Meryl Streep, I like that one. When they were first casting Mrs. Peacock, they wanted like an old Hollywood star. They talked to Elizabeth Taylor. They wanted, they thought about some other people, maybe Janet Leigh they talked about. So I can see, maybe like this classic Hollywood star. And I think of all people, Meryl Streep certainly fits the bill. Maybe Helen Mirren.
Ooh, Helen Mirren's a good call. Helen Mirren is actually a really good call. I like Mrs. Peacock. I kind of like Bill Hader as Professor Plum, although I don't know if he could give off the creep vibes. I mean, he's got kind of a dark side, obviously, in Barry. I'm not sure if he could pull off like the creepiness of Christopher Lloyd. Big waste of time though for Robert Downey Jr. Big casting for just to be around for a couple scenes and then be off of it. And here's my favorite part. I forgot to mention this. The director, Wes Anderson.
Oh gosh.
Oh, now it's a whole different movie. Okay.
Yeah. Now we have to figure out who Bill Murray's going to play.
Right.
Yeah. He's the evangelist.
Oh, perfect.
I like Nick Offerman as Colonel Mustard. I actually think that's a good call. And I don't know about Margot Robbie as Yvette, the maid. What do y'all think about that?
It's a pretty small part for her. She's Barbie now. She doesn't need to do that. I mean, I think these casting choices are good if you are also imagining who played them in the 85 movie, because they kind of have similarities to their styles. So I think if they ever do get around to doing the Clue remake, it would probably behoove them to go different. And it's not the most diverse sounding cast either.
No.
Which would be more the take these days.
Sure. I mean, even the game itself became more diverse, right? Isn't there no longer Mrs. White? It's like Dr. Orchid.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that would be more of a question as who plays Dr. Orchid, because if they're doing it to the game today.
I don't know anything about Dr. Orchid's personality, unfortunately.
I believe Dr. Orchid is of Asian descent, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right.
So you need a prominent Asian actress, like a Michelle Yeoh, a Lucy Liu, perhaps, maybe even somebody from a more recent generation. But you know what? These are inspired, and I do agree. I think that people are imagining who would fit the physical profile of the stars from 1985 in this particular casting. But it is interesting, and we appreciate Sophia for sending that over. Should we get into the minute that was? Because they're still picking lots, like we came off from the last episode. Not a lot of dialogue going on, other than it's just me and you, Honeybunch. John, what are your first reactions to this minute, and what insight can you give us into a less than enthralling scene from one of our favorite films?
So Jonathan Lynn would say later, years later, I think he says this in his audio commentary. He said that he was really proud that they got this in one take. It took 2 takes. And the reason it took 2 takes is they get through the whole thing. They do it perfectly. This is probably why he remembers it as one take. They do it perfectly. And then Christopher Lloyd goes up to Eileen Brennan and says, "It's you and me, Honeybunch." And she just bursts out laughing. And it ruined the take. And so they had to do it again. And if you watch, I'm going to tell everyone, go watch the second take that they used at the very end, like a split second before it cuts. look at her face, and she's trying really hard not to do it again. Like they probably should have cut that like a split second earlier, because I think you can tell that she's trying really hard not to laugh.
I love that. I mean, and to me, I think that, and Jeff, you being a director and a filmmaker, you'd probably be the better person to answer this, but I feel like some of the, something that's lost in cinema today, not to sound too much like Siskel and Ebert, is the lack of long takes. It seems as though a lot of things are quick cut, get the coverage, move to the next scene, and not so much done in these one flowing, effortless take, to where when it does happen, for instance, I believe it's Spectre, the James Bond movie, where there's this really beautiful opening shot that goes on for a very long time before it cuts, and they nail it in this one take. It really does stand out. And a lot of the movies from this era, specifically this scene in particular, it stands out to me.
I think a lot of times when they do the long takes now, they're show-off takes, because Spectre is definitely like, it's supposed to be fancy. Spielberg still does very long takes in his movies. They're just not that noticeable, because he'll lock the camera down and he moves the actors in the foreground and the background. I know he still does it now, but one of the best examples is if you think of Jaws, when when Brody and the mayor and all his goons are riding the ferry, when they're talking about if it's a shark attack. That whole ferry trip is one take. It's just locked down, but everybody's moving closer to the camera or further from the camera. Mayor Vaughn like leads Brody away to say, "You say Barracuda, we all go wah wah." But it's all because the movement is happening. It doesn't feel so much like it's one take. So it still happens with directors that aren't doing it to, do like the player's first 12 minutes where it's very obvious that, hey, everybody look at this. And this is very much like that too. It's cool that it is one shot, but it's kind of cool like in a play kind of way that it's one shot. It doesn't need to be in one shot. It could be cut up and you could see them hold up the lots and make it more dramatic, but it's cool that it is.
Yeah, I mean, John, other than this particular scene that we're talking about, are there more things like this in Clue that maybe Jeff and I haven't covered before, where there are these long extended takes that they nail in one? Because I feel like the way that the dialogue is written and the zippiness of it, it doesn't leave a lot of room for these quick cuts. It feels like they all have to be in a one-shot kind of scenario.
Yeah, it also is tricky because of the ensemble nature of the film, right? So there's a lot of medium shots in Clue if you look, to get two people in there and stuff. There's close-ups, but not as many as you might have in another movie. And when they conceived the movie, they really wanted it to be an ensemble piece. That was something they wanted from the beginning. And if you step back, you might not notice it, but if you really step back and watch the movie with that in mind, you'll see that they're actually working pretty hard to get everyone on screen. I'm trying to remember, I think there were scenes, but they do have cuts, but there are scenes in the study when things are being explained that go on a little bit longer. And I know that some of those master shots where because they will still in that scene cut away to people, but when they were filming the master shot of like Wadsworth stalking around the room, confronting everyone, telling them, what they were being blackmailed for, that one, some of those had the most takes. They needed the most tries to get that right because those were longer. Clue was not a movie where it was like Kubrick taking 100 takes. Most scenes, 3-4 takes. But those would tick up to 8, 9, 10, maybe 12, 13 takes. Still not horrible, but yeah, those had the most.
Yeah, the David Fincher, right? 99 takes on the opening scene of The Social Network. But Jeff, why do you feel like? Do you feel like it's a? I don't know. I don't want to say a cheating of the audience or anything like that. I'm trying to think of the best way to characterize it. The quick cuts today, is it kind of a gimmick in some ways to, I don't know, make it more the TikTokification of the audiences, right? Where we need to see stuff fast. Why do you think that people do? Because you can watch a scene, like a modern scene today in any film, and you'll see, even if it's just two people talking, there's 7 or 8, 9, 10 cuts like in one scene.
What's the famous example people always use? It's a Liam Neeson movie It's one of the Takens.
Okay.
It's like
where
Taken 3, and he jumps over a fence.
the chain link fence, and there's 8 cuts of him hopping over a fence. I think it's done. It's like the Michael Bay kind of thing. I think it's done because they think it's an attention span thing, but I think we underestimate moviegoers because I think if it's good, they don't need it to cut. And I've said this before. Whenever I've seen Clue in a theater, it still plays just as good as anything that's out now, and it's not cut. I was thinking of another long shot when the cop shows up. I think when it comes from the door to the point where he leads the cop all the way to go use the phone, that's all one take too, where he says the chandelier almost killed us. That's all just going back from the front door. So I think it's the style choice. You see it a lot in action movies, but then you'll have movies like John Wick where it's one long take, or what's the Angelina Jolie one where she does like the really long. There's another one where Atomic Blonde, maybe? I don't know.
She wasn't in it.
There's another one where who's in Atomic Blonde? Charlize Theron. Thank you. I answered myself. Yes. Good. Who's going to give us an email about that one? I caught it first, though. Haha, Matt. But anyway, yeah, I think it's a style choice, but I don't know. Are we getting out of? I don't know if I see it as much. Are we starting to leave the?
I hope so.
Cut. I don't see it as much. I don't think.
Yeah, I would hope so. Now
it's going to definitely reek of early 2000s.
It's gimmicky. It's gimmicky. I want to ask about the John, your analysis of the pairings here. So we have Mrs. White and Wadsworth, Yvette and Mr. Green, Mustard and Scarlet, Peacock and Plum. Was there any? I mean, obviously, there's always thought put behind everything, but was there any particular reasonings of these mashups other than maybe the obvious of Yvette and Mr. Green?
I think, yeah. I mean, if you look at it, everybody is with the person they hate the most. Like everybody is with the person they like the least. So, Scarlet and Mustard have not got along. Mrs. Peacock is appalled at Professor Plum, and then of course, the gay man being paired with the sexy maid is another one. And then, Mrs. White and Wadsworth, I don't know that they stand out as much, but they definitely had conflicts. There's a great scene, and I know some people have pointed it out, but when Wadsworth throws the key away outside, and he's out on the front porch and he chucks the key and the rain is coming down. If you watch that scene really carefully, Mrs. White tries to escape. She tries to sneak around him and he has to grab her and pull her back in. And then after that, that's when she says, Wadsworth, let me out, and demands the key. And he says no. So I don't know if that's exactly why, but I do think, that they're all paired up with the person they shouldn't be, basically, to make it funnier. And it works.
It does work. I love the pairings. Jeff, which of these odd couples do you appreciate the most?
Oh, boy. Well, I think because I love the cutbacks to Green and Yvette at the bottom of the stairs. I think that's hilarious that lingers as long as it does. That's one of my favorite visuals in the whole movie. But I also in one shot, Wadsworth and Mrs. White in their respective doorways. Are you going to go in? Yes. Are you? Yes. And then they all lunge out and check out each other. So I would say, although Scarlet and Mustard are funny physically because they keep bumping into each other, and they're all good. I would say either Green and Yvette or Wadsworth and Mrs. White. But going back to Mrs. White's pairing, I think what's also good is Mrs. White is the gold digger of the bunch. I mean, she only shows interest in Professor Plum when she says, "Oh, are you a doctor?" And so when she ends up with the mere butler, as Scarlett calls him later, I think that's not going to help her situation at all.
Yeah, I tend to like Peacock and Plum for no other reason than just the line that John was referring to. It's me and you, Honeybunch. It's just what Christopher Lloyd, his comedy, I think, in this movie overall is somewhat understated. Just he's more creepy than anything, and even though he is creepy in this particular moment, this is one of his funnier lines, like his funnier line deliveries. Would you agree, John?
Oh yeah, it's perfect. And I mean, again, that's why she busted up laughing at it. Yeah, he absolutely nails that line. He's really good. He's only, the only time that I think that he's not pretty understated and pretty subtle. He does a really good job with it. The only time I can think when that's not the case is when he's on the couch with Miss Scarlet in the lounge. If you watch his face, he looks like Doc Brown for a second. And that's like the only time he does that. He just kind of has this shocked look on his face. The rest of the film, he's creepy, but he's just such a buffoon that it makes it funny and not menacing. And I think he just plays it perfectly.
Yeah, Jeff, we talked about the break between the two, right? About him doing Back to the Future and then jumping into this movie. Wasn't it like a few weeks?
Yeah, very short.
Yeah.
Oh,
less than.
We referred back to your Instagram, John, for shooting dates on Clue, because we went to Brad's book for Back to the Future, and then we went to your Instagram for This Day in Clue, and I think it's the next week that he's in. Maybe he was in London for the premiere, or was that after?
The premiere was later. The premiere was after Clue, I believe.
Yeah, that was after. Mm-hmm. But he's definitely bouncing back and forth between Emmett Brown and Professor Emmett Plum.
Yeah, it was literally a couple of weeks, it feels like. So there is some line deliveries in here where you're like, is that Doc Brown? Yeah.
Maybe he was just tired from being Doc Brown. That's why he's so understated. He's like, I'm just going to sit on the couch.
And John,
let you guys do the heavy lifting.
Tell me if you think this theory has any credence that Jeff and I came up with, of the fact that because Christopher Lloyd did this super iconic role of Doc Brown in 1985, and then jumped into Professor Plum right afterward, and this movie at the time not as successful as Back to the Future, I guess is putting it lightly. Do you feel that that's maybe why Chris Lloyd doesn't remember a whole lot about this movie?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like that had to be so weird for him that year, 1985. Two movies that take place within a year of each other, 1954 and 1955. So he's doing two period pieces. One is huge. I mean, there were a ton of reviews. I'm sure you've both seen. I mean, there were a bunch of reviews in 1985 that says that he stole the show, Back to the Future, that his performance really just stood out. And then he's in Clue, which is, he filmed Clue. So the first day of shooting was May 20th, 1985. Back to the Future came out in June, right?
July 3rd. Mm-hmm.
July 3rd. Okay. So he's got that time. And then Clue doesn't come out until December. And Back to the Future is still in the top 10 box office in December 1985. Yeah. I mean, 6 months later. And I always forget this. I say sometimes that it outperformed Clue. I don't know if there was a week when it actually outgrossed Clue, but I think there was one when it actually outgrossed Clue. And so, I put that. I actually talk about that in the introduction to my book. Why I think a lot of the cast defaults to a lot of the same anecdotes. I think a lot of them just don't remember that much. There was no victory lap for Clue, right? Like. You're in a town where you're only as good as your last movie. Like, oh, let's go on to the next one. Let's hope this one's a hit. And everybody forgets Clue. I think that's what a lot of them kind of just counted on. And so, I don't think they remember much. I watch some of Jeff's documentary or some of the outtakes from the documentary. And, you see Michael McKean. Now, wait, was that? Oh, gee, I'm not. Yeah, I think we did this, and I think that's pretty much everybody's experience on Clue.
Yeah, you'll see Christopher Lloyd says, "Oh, we rehearsed so much." Michael McKean says, "We didn't have time to rehearse."
Yeah,
there's a lot of that. I mean, that's why it was so. It was either a struggle or it was easy to get them. For me, for the documentary, because the first reaction was, "Why is that the movie you want to talk about?" And this was also, 6 years ago, and I think over the years. And to the benefit of John and me, Clue has gotten even more over the last 6 years talked about. And I think a lot of people saw it during the pandemic. And for whatever reason, during the pandemic, people were watching a lot of mystery kind of things. That's why Columbo came back in a big, bad way during the pandemic. And Murder, She Wrote, you hear a lot about. But I think it was odd that that's what the movie that I wanted to interview them about. And then it was almost kind of like charming, like, I guess, sure. I did the costumes for Blade Runner and the sequel's about to come out, but yeah, I'll talk to you about what Mrs. Peacock was wearing. That's cute. Sure. And then they kind of forgot about it. And then, I got an email a couple weeks ago from Leslie Ann Warren's people going, can you send us a link to the documentary? Because I think they kind of forgot that they did it.
Yeah.
And then, and they're like, somehow they heard, and they're like, we should probably watch it. And then I send it on Vimeo on a private link, so you can see when people look at it. So every couple of days, bloop, someone watched it. Bloop, someone watched it. Like, it's starting to get around.
Yeah.
I think
what they think of it, but yeah.
I think that's right. John, two quick things. Like, I think people in the pandemic watched a lot of mysteries because mysteries are comforting because it's chaos. Someone's dead. We don't know what happened. And then everything is resolved at the end. Oh, we figured it out. It's very comforting. I think that was really helpful to people in the pandemic. I don't know if you both saw the Empire magazine issue that just came out about Clue, with mostly about Tim Curry, and had a big interview with him. And that was fantastic. But Jonathan Lynn said something in there that I've suspected for a long time, and it really it hit me. He said, I'm kind of ambivalent about it. He really has mixed feelings about Clue. I mean, here's this thing that now people love, but it almost ruined his career because it flopped. And I think he's such a nice man that he doesn't want to turn people away or let people down. But I just sort of get this sense that he'll talk about it, but he's still baffled. He's like, why do you want to talk about this? And has still to this day has mixed feelings about it, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, the ambivalence of Clue from Jonathan Lynn. I mean, I guess this happens with the passage of time with so many things, right? I mean, some things come out and they're amazing at the time, and then we look at them 20 years later and you're like, oh, was Gravity really all that good of a movie? And then
Avatar.
Well, I've never seen Avatar. But and then you go to something like Clue that was, as you alluded to, John, not very popular at the time, box office wise. Jonathan Lynn takes him a while, I guess, before his next big hit, which must have been My Cousin Vinny, would have been his next hit film, if my filmography of him is right. And again, long forgotten. And then there's this huge resurgence just over his last 10 years is when Clue really started to come around, as people going, oh, you've never seen Clue? And again, I don't think that we're ever here to debate the cinematic excellence and achievement that is Clue, or lack thereof. I think we just want to talk about the movie that we love. And I think that for Jonathan Lynn, when you do put out a creative project and it isn't successful, you do look at that as a rejection from the public. And I think he's probably like the girl who wasn't asked out to prom and now is 20 years later like this hot gazillionaire. And everyone's throwing their feet at him and going, where were you in my formative years when I could have used the confidence boost? So it is an interesting dichotomy. But you know what? John Hatch is going to talk all about it. And What Do You Mean Murder? Clue and the Making of a Cult Classic, available November the 7th. 2023, wherever books are sold. I've already pre-ordered. Jeff is now pre-ordered now that he knows where he's going to be. And I know John,
the address, yes.
You've even pre-ordered because you want to get your book in the mail. I've been there. We want to see it come in the mail. Yeah. It's a great feeling. It's an interesting feeling. You're going to enjoy it. I promise you. But John, where can people find you if they want to talk more to you?
People can find me mostly on Instagram. That's where I do my Clue stuff. It's been a little slow lately while I'm recording the audiobook. But yeah, look for me on Instagram, Clue Book 1. Somebody stole Clue Book, but Clue Book 1, number 1 afterwards. That's the best place to find me. I'm on other social media, and you can find me there, but I'm really random. You'll hear about Clue or the Boston Red Sox or food or politics or something. So just Instagram's best.
Instagram's best. And you can find the documentary, Who Done It? The Clue documentary, available on Screenbox, Amazon Prime, or wherever you can rent your videos, I'm sure, and at cluedoc.com. You can find me on all social media at Brad Gilmore. This has been Minute 47 of Clue the Movie, and we'll be back next week with Minute 48.
possibly find out which of you did it.
What do you mean, which of you did it?
Well, I didn't do it. Well, one of us did. We all had the opportunity. We all had a motive.
Great. We'll all go to the chair.
Maybe it wasn't one of us. Well, who else could it have been? Who else is in the house? Only the cook. The cook!
All of those characters are searching for a murderer in Clue, the comic mystery with 3 endings. We'll tell you whether any one of them is worth seeing on At the Movies, the movie review program. I'm Gene Sisco, film critic of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times. And let's also talk about whether the beginning of Clue is worth seeing.
Well, let's go all the way. Let's talk about the middle.
Let's talk about the middle, too.
Our next film is based on the 40-year-old board game Clue, and it starts out in a very funny way with a whole bunch of characters assembling in a mansion, all have familiar names, Miss Scarlet, Mrs. White, Colonel Mustard, all taken from the board game, and they all share the same secret. They're all being blackmailed by the same man.
I, too, am being blackmailed for something I didn't do.
Me too. And me.
Not me.
You're not being blackmailed?
Oh, I'm being blackmailed, all right. But I did what I'm being blackmailed for.
What did you do?
Well, to be perfectly frank, I run a specialized hotel and a telephone service which provide gentlemen with the company of a young lady for a short while.
Oh, yeah? What's the phone number?
So how did you know Colonel Mustard works in Washington? Is he one of your clients?
Certainly not.
I was asking Miss Scarlet.
Well, you tell him it's not true.
It's not true.
Is that true?
No, it's not true.
Ha-ha, so it is true.
A double negative. Double negative? You mean you have photographs?
That sounds like a confession to me. In fact, the double negative has led to proof positive. I'm afraid you gave yourself away.
Are you trying to make me look stupid in front of the other guests?
Don't need any help from me, sir.
That's right.
Now, as long as the talented cast is cracking one-liners, Clue is kind of fun, but the verbal gags last for less than half the film.
Why is that funny?
I see. That's why he was lying on his back in his coffin.
I didn't kill him.
Then why are you paying the blackmailer?
I don't want a scandal, do I? We had had a very humiliating public confrontation. He was deranged. He was lunatic. He didn't actually seem to like me very much. He had threatened to kill me in public.
Why would he want to kill you in public?
I think she meant he threatened in public to kill her.
Well, was that his final word on the matter?
Being killed is pretty final, wouldn't you say?
And yet he was the one who died, not you, Mrs. White, not you.
What did he do for a living?
He was a scientist. Nuclear physics.
What was he like?
He was always a rather stupidly optimistic man. I mean, I'm afraid it came as a great shock to him when he died, but he was found dead at home. His head had been cut off, and so had his, you know. I had been out all evening at the movies.
Do you miss him?
Well, it's a matter of life after death. Now that he's dead, I have a life.
There's some pretty funny gags there, and that one about the crossing of the legs. That is a classic. Now, after those gags early in the film, there's a murder. And that's where the movie falls apart, as all the characters begin running around the mansion as if they were mice in a maze. And then there's the matter of the film's ending. It has been well advertised by Paramount Pictures that 3 different endings, lasting about 3 minutes apiece, were filmed for this movie, revealing 3 different murderers. Well, think about it. If we know that walking into the movie, then we really can't get too excited about guessing who done it, because, think about it, literally anybody could have done it, and anybody did do it. 3 different people did do it. And that cuts the heart out of the tension of a mystery. Now, either Paramount should have showed all 3 endings, as they did to critics, or, better yet, simply strengthen the script and pick the best murder ending of all.
I think it would have been better just to do all 3 endings, because since you're right, it doesn't matter who did it, then why do we only get one person who did it? I thought it was kind of clever that the same facts fit 3 different guilty parties, and so it would be fun to see all 3. I'll bet that's what they do with a video cassette. They're going to have to throw all 3 endings in. What are you going to do, buy 3 cassettes?
No.
In order to find out, when he didn't care in the first place, who did it?
I will say this. I've seen all 3 endings. The critics got to do that. The public didn't. And the theaters are marked A, B, and C where they're playing. Now, Paramount doesn't want me to do this, but...
Okay, so let's both of us...
do it at once.
Okay.
The best ending, I think the funniest ending is A.
I agree.
What's the best? So go to a theater if you go at all, and I don't know whether you should go at all, and an A theater. Stay away from the worst, which is... C.
Right.
Hey, you're smart.
To make it even easier, probably be best if you didn't go to this movie at all.